Church, will you stand to your feet with us this morning as we sing? We're going to sing of the love we have because of Jesus in this place. We sing together now. When darkness tries to roll over my bones, when darkness tries to roll over my bones, when sorrow comes to steal the joy I am, when brokenness and pain is all I know, oh, I won't be shaken. No, I won't be shaken. Come on, we declare that my fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. Oh, we sing, shake no longer. Shake no longer has a place to hide. And we declare in this place that I am not a captive to the lies. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid to leave my past behind. No, I won't be shaken. I won't. Come on, every voice in this place, we declare. Oh, my fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. Oh, we stand in your love. Oh, we declare there's power in this place. Oh, there is power that can break off every chain. There's power that can empty out the grave. There's resurrection power that can save. There's power in your name. Power. Come on, you can do better. We sing it loud. Oh, there's power that can break off every chain. Yeah. Well, there's power that can empty out the grave. Oh, there's resurrection power that can save. Oh, there's power in your name. Power. Come on, we declare in this place. Oh, my fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't. Come on, we declare this at the church this morning. When I stand in your love, my fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. Oh, yes, I stand. We say that my fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand. Yes, we're standing here. Oh, we declare this fear that has to go in this place. 'Cause your love is here. Oh, your love is here. We're standing in your love. Come on, can we celebrate in this place, Journey Church? My name's Baugh. I'm one of the worship pastors here. I'm so glad to be here with you this morning. Why don't you find somebody you don't know, say hello, make this place feel like home. Again, we just want to welcome you here. We're so glad you're here with us this morning. And I just want you to know that we are worshiping a God and we believe in a God that loves each and every person in this place. We want you to know that about Journey Church. You know, my wife once showed me love by flying across the country, and where she was at, there was a place that had pies that I really loved. And so she wanted to find a way to bring that pie back to me. And you know, rather than just showing up and saying, hey, here's a pie, I love you, that would have been great. It would have meant something. But instead she said, hey, here's a pie, but let me tell you the story. Because there's a lot that went into it. I had to go to get this pie, but they ran out, so I had to go back the next day. But I was flying out that day, and I didn't know if I'd find it or not. And I got the last one, and then I had to find a cooler because I had to fly with it. So I found a cooler, and then I put ice on it, and then I had to, and kept going with all of that. And I made it here, and here's this pie. I love you. And you know, sometimes love can mean something, but it means so much more when we know the story of sacrifice and effort and work that it took to give that love. And that's the love that we're going to celebrate this morning, is that there's a story behind the love that God has for you through Jesus. There is sacrifice, effort, and work that had to happen to bring this act of love to us this morning. So we remember it as we sing. We experience it and encounter it in this place. So when you sing with us, you begin to remember that sacrifice. From the darkness, He met us here, right where we're at, here, right now. And we sing now together. If from the darkness I called your name, and into darkness your mercy came. You called me out, lifted me up. Your love, you bore my weakness, took my shame, buried my burdens, fields of grace. You called me out, lifted me up. How great is your love? From the heights of heaven, you stepped down to earth. In His imperfection, gave your life for us. We are amazed. We stand in awe, for we have been changed by the power of the cross. How great, how great, how great is your love. In your presence, where I belong. Oh, you called me out, lifted me up. How great is your love? From the heights of heaven we sing, you stepped down to earth. In His imperfection, and we are amazed. We stand in awe, for we have been changed by the power of the cross. How great, how great, how great is your love? How great, how great, how great is your love? How great, how great, how great is your love for us. Oh, how great is your love? Won't you show us here? Won't you show us now? We declare there's never been, there never will. There's never been, sing this now. There will never be a God like you, oh, love so true. There's never been, there will never be a God like you. Come on, keep singing that truth out, declare it now. There's never been, come on and sing. There will never be, oh, a God like you. Oh, the love so true. There's never been, there will never be, oh, a God like you. Oh, the love so true.
For your love. When we encounter you, when we encounter your presence, we encounter your love. We thank you for that today. Come on, we sing. You put your love on the line to bear the weight of sin that was mine. Washing my river of wrongs, thank you, Jesus, into the sea of your infinite love. With arms held high, Lord, I give my life, knowing I'm found in Christ, in your love forever. With all I am, in your grace I stand, the greatest of all romance, love of God, my Savior. Oh, you're my Savior. Thank you, Jesus. Come on, we sing Mercy Roars. Mercy roars. Come on. Like hurricane winds. Oh, furious love laid waste to my stand. With arms held high, Lord, I give my life, knowing I'm found in Christ, in your love forever.
given his life for us. That's why we worship. And I'm so glad that you're here. As you're sitting down, would you go ahead, give someone a high five, tell them you're glad that they're here today at Journey Church. And for those of you who are watching online all across the world, I want to welcome you and thank you so much for joining us this morning. And for those of us right here at Lake Worth, good morning. My name is Will Hutcherson. I am our next gen pastor, which means I get to help support our kids ministry, our student ministry, our young adults ministry, all the way from 0 to 25. And if you have kids in any of those age groups, it is our honor to come alongside you as a church to help you build the spiritual foundation of your kids' lives. And we get to do that every single week. So thank you so much. And if you're brand new here, maybe this is your first time here at Journey, as you walked in today, you found a package just like this on your seat, and inside of there is a connection card. We'd love for you to fill that out at some point during this service. And after the service, drop it off at our red giving bins or hand it to one of us. You'll see name tags in the foyer. We'd love to connect with you, get to know you, and just meet you. And so please fill that out. And if, as you're filling that out, maybe you have some questions about Journey. Maybe you have questions about even life and purpose, and that's why you're here today. If you're new or newer to Journey, we have something just for you called Discover. And it's going to be happening next week after every single service, and we'd love for you to join us next week. So make plans to do that. We'd love to have you at Journey. As I mentioned before, I'm the next gen pastor, so one of the things that I get to do is I get to spend a lot of time with kids and teenagers, and I get to hear their stories. And this past week, we had a teenager who came up to me and was telling me about the decisions that they had made, the guilt and shame that they were feeling from some terrible decisions. They had 21 days of fasting. They were praying with us. But after that time, they just kind of made some choices. And after this past Wednesday and being in their small group and having a small group leader and having people pray with them, this young man came up to me and said, you know what? I'm ready to get back on the right track, and my heart is on fire to follow Jesus again. And Journey, yeah, isn't that amazing? And I just want to say, it's because of you every single week we get to invest in the next generation, and there are lives being transformed, whether they're teenagers, kids, young adults, lives are being transformed. And I want to thank you, each and every one of you who call Journey Church your home, and as you give, you make it possible for lives to be transformed. So we'd love to invite you to be a part of that. There's 3 ways that you can give. You can give by using this envelope, you can give by the app, or you can give online. But however you give, just know it's because of you that lives are being transformed, and we are so, so grateful for you. This week, we kick off a brand new series called Stress Less, and I think we can all agree we could use some less stress in our lives. And I'm excited our lead pastor, Scott, is back and will be joining us. And he's here, and you're going to hear from him in just a few moments. Journey, thank you so much. I'll see you a little bit later in the service.
All righty. I hope you guys are ready to have a little bit less stress in your life. I am so excited about this series because I don't know about you, but I truly believe, and you're going to see this not just from my own opinion, but I truly believe that you're going to realize just how toxic stress is and what an epidemic this is in our society. And the goal of this series is to kind of help us kind of walk through and navigate some tools so you can have less stress in your life. And so we're just glad you're joining us, everyone over at Boynton, everyone watching online or watching wherever you're watching us and being a part of this. I love that we're one church in multiple locations gathering together. And this next 4 weeks, I'll be leading us, I'll be teaching us through this incredible, I think just powerful series that I think can help change so many of our lives. And so in order to do that, I want to start out by just a little example that I thought would be helpful for a lot of you that walk in this. And it's centered down to, I don't know if you ever had an acai bowl. Anybody here ever had an acai bowl? Wow, there's a lot more healthy people here than I realized. So I never even heard of it. But during the Daniel fast, you do anything because you can't eat good food. So I discovered this during the Daniel fast and really became kind of like enjoy these because they're so healthy. And there's like blueberries and strawberries. In fact, I want a friend up here. I have one friend that's really healthy. Tim, come on up here. Tim's a good buddy of mine. And you can give him a round of applause. Tim helps an usher. You just hold this. Don't eat it yet, but just hold it there. His thing. Now, Tim is a good friend. He's also on the board here, and we live in the same neighborhood and hang out a lot. And he works out all the time. I know it's hard to tell, but he does. And he eats very healthy. We'll go out to dinner, and I'll get good food. He'll eat salmon and salad. And so I'm tell you, he looks great for 60, though. You got to give him credit for that, where credit is due, and all these things. But he's a health fanatic. He really is. He eats healthy. He really takes care of himself. And all joking aside, he actually inspires me and helps me, eat better and works on me getting to work out and do all those great things. And so I want to just kind of have him have a bite of this acai bowl to take a picture of what it would be in your mind, right? You got antioxidants. You got no sugar. Just hold off a minute. Because before you eat it, what I want to do is I'm going to put a little sweetener on here to help it taste even better. This is like a magic sauce. It's really good. Now, it's just, it's pretty healthy for the most part. You got coconut, you got strawberries and blueberries and kiwi and acai and all that great stuff. So you can go ahead and take a little bite. But before you do, I just wanted to give you a little bit of insight what I just put on it, though. Because it's sweet and it's really good, but I just want you to look, our lawyers are making us do this from the church. So let me just give you some of the side effects. I just want him to know, it's only fair, right? So some of the side effects of that I just put on it is fatigue. So you can handle all of that. Shortness of breath, rapid heartbeat, dizziness, confusion, agitation, heart disease, sleep problems, digestive problems, depression, obesity, memory impairment, skin problems, risk of death of cardiovascular disease, hair loss, slow metabolism, irregular blood sugar levels, reduced sperm count, reduction in sexual desires. I got to read the list. I'm sorry, I didn't write it. Increased fat storage. I'm sorry. It suppresses your immune system, can cause cancer, headaches, back pain, stroke, memory loss, infertility, heartburn, and ulcers. Okay, enjoy, have fun. No, I wouldn't actually eat that, but yeah. But here's what I want you to see. This, and you can take that. That's my gift for you because I didn't really put that on there. Go ahead. You enjoy that during my service. Eat it. Don't spill it. There you go. See, what I want you to understand is I didn't read the ingredients of what was in this. This is just stevia, by the way. It's harmless. You know what I read? I actually read the side effects of stress. That all of those things are not rat poisoning. Those are not things that were like, oh my goodness, I would never touch it. Those are the things that you're ingesting into your body, into your soul, into your life when you begin to take on, once again, more stress than you need to. Everyone has a little stress, I get that. But what I'm talking about is when you're living in this consistent state of stress, which by the way our culture is, that those are the side effects that stress has on your life. And it is an epidemic. It is catastrophic. In fact, doctors have now said that they can actually look at all of the sicknesses and struggles that we have as people, and they estimate that around 75% of all of the sickness and suffering stuff that we have in our physical bodies is connected to stress and the levels of stress that we face in our lives. Now, the problem with stress is when I say about that, you're like, wow, I'm more stressed. But what so many people believe when it comes to stress is that it's out of our control. Like we think, well, yeah, but stress is just part of life. I mean, if you have kids, I have 2 of them, they're stressed. If you have marriage, that could be stressful. A job, your boss, that's stressful, the demands of life. And so many of us have this view of stress that go, yeah, I know stress is toxic. I know stress is harmful. But stress comes from the outside. There's nothing I can really do about it. And can I just challenge you for a moment? Yes, there is. In fact, over the next 4 weeks, what I want to do is I want to empower you with some tools to fight off the stress. And while we cannot reduce stress completely, I realize stress is part of life. We can learn how to stress a lot less. We can learn how to get a lot of these toxins and poisons out of our body, out of our mind, out of our emotions, and live in a way of life that is causing us to flourish. In fact, what we're going to do in this series is we're going to walk through some very practical things you can do in your mind. We're going to look at that, right? Because fear and anxiety is part of stress, some disciplines you can do in our mind. We're going to look at things we can do physically in our body and how we can plan and do things in our life. And we're going to look at some spiritual things because you know what? Your mind, your body, and your spirit. And stress infects all of those things, and you have to battle them with all of those things. And so over the next 4 weeks, we're going to go on a journey together looking at all of these things to help us stress less. And by the way, enjoy life more. So in order to start our series, the way we're going to start it is, I want to look what I believe to be as a foundational part of stressing less. In fact, I believe you're not going to be able to, no matter what we do here in the future, won't matter if we don't get this one today right. And so in order to understand something, we're actually going to look at a prescription and a command that God has given every one of us when it comes to how we live our life that you will see is a direct connection to having less stress in your life. You're going to see that this command, by the way, even though it's thousands of years old, even though it predates all of us, it's been around forever, that it is just as relevant today. In fact, this goes back all the way through the beginning of relationship with God and His kingdom, the Jewish people, all the way into Jesus who teaches the same thing. And so we're going to kind of look at one of the 10 commandments that God has given us that Jesus would reaffirm later. And we're going to see how it connects to you having less stress in your life. And here's what I want you to do. Let's begin to look at the command that God gives you. And I want you to understand there's a connection to this and the amount of all those poisons and toxins you experience and don't experience in your life. The book of Exodus, chapter 20, verse 8. Here's God speaking to the nation of Israel. He has just rescued them from the promised land, or from slavery. He's delivering them to the promised land, and He's giving them tools to have successful families, souls, spirits, lives, culture. All of these things are designed. And He's building them and giving them direction to do this. And here is one of the top 10 things that He tells them to do. He says, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. I mean, in other words, you're going to have one day of your week that's separate from every other day of the week. For 6 days you shall labor. In other words, you should work hard. This is not about being lazy. And do all your work. But the seventh day, and I want you to see this, is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. In other words, so there's this one day that's separate than all the other days. And a key component of this is there's a part of this day that you focus on doing what you're doing right now. You're worshiping God, you're praying, you're learning from God's word, and you're doing these things. He goes, okay, one of the top 10 things is you're going to have one day separated from every other day during the week, and on that day, you're to devote it to God. That's the first part. And here's the second component that you need to do during this day. Go ahead and put the next slide up. On it, on the Sabbath, you shall not do, what's that word? Any work, emails, phone calls, chores. Neither you, nor your son, your daughter, nor your manservant or maidservant, if you have one of those, your animals or the alien within your gates, okay? So whatever it is. In other words, what he's saying is, it's your responsibility as people to make sure that in your house, in your family, in your business, and whatever it is that you're leading or in charge of, that you are setting apart one single day of week. It's separate from all the other days, and on it there's a component of seeking God, and on it there's a component of you can't do any work. In fact, you could say it, like this. That there are 3 components, if you will, to the Sabbath day that God has commanded us to live. And the first thing is, if you're taking notes, is that there is a rhythm to it. And the rhythm to it is that it's every week. So God mandates that every single week, and all of us sort of have this day. So it's a rhythm. It's not like do it when we feel good, do it when we feel like, do it after the busy season, do it after tax season, do it after the sports season's up, do it after your busy time or anything like that. It's that every single day, there's this rhythm that we need to live every week. There's one day, it's set apart, it's holy to God. And that. Here's the other thing that we're given to it. There's also a routine. And the routine is, it's not just rest, like chill and watch Netflix. Excuse me, can someone get me some water back there? Just bring me a cup of water. Something's in my throat. Thank you. But it's not just we rest and don't do work and we're watching Netflix for 10 hours, taking vegging out and doing nothing valuable, right? There's an element of worship. Like God says, you're bringing God into this day. So there's the rhythm every week. There's the routine. Oh, it's rest. Yeah, absolutely. You can take a nap. You can have fun. You can do those things, which is awesome. But the second component to that is God is in this. Like there's this moment of God. It's prayer. It's worship. It's church. It's reading the scriptures. It's his element. And the third thing you see that God has prescribed and commanded to us is also the boundaries. And the boundaries are, there's no work. You can't return the email. You can't do the honey-do list that you should have done 6 months ago. But regardless of that, you can't do it on this day every single week. One guy's clapping who's going to be single soon. But, all right, you can't do that. Thanks, Will. And so you can do no work. And to clarify work, what it is anything that is actually work. That means you can't reorganize your garage. That means you can't clean the house. That means not vacuuming. That means you can't return, once again, emails and texts. That means you can't do, work for your, getting ready for the Monday or whatever it is, if you take your Sabbath on a Sunday. And the principles I want you to see is from the beginning of his relationship with his people, who he's wanting them to thrive. He goes, you're going to create every week something called a Sabbath, which literally means you can do nothing. It's a day of rest. And it's a rhythm every week. It's a routine, rest and worship, and it's a boundary. You can't do any work. And what I want us to understand is from the very onset of God wanting his people to flourish in life, he created this boundary. And by the way, alongside of it, if you ever disobeyed it, there was an incredible consequence and a cost to doing it. So it was something that was very serious to God. So here's my question. Why would you put this as a top 10 rule if you were God and you love his people? Like, why would you look, if you're trying to teach these people who, by the way, don't know what they're doing, they've been slaves their whole life, they've never been their own nation, why in the world would you say one of the top 10 things for you to be successful in this life is the rhythm every single week of a Sabbath, the routine of a Sabbath of rest and worship, and the boundary of a Sabbath that there is to be no work? And here's why I think it is, and I think it's clear. It's because the Jewish people at this time would be unbelievably stressed out over the to-do lists they would have to do in their lives. I don't know if you ever have to-do lists, right? But could you imagine their to-do list? So they just got rescued from the nation of Egypt. They just got rescued from it. So they're in a desert. They have no government. They have no retirement. They have no school system. They have no tax code. They have no wall around. They have no homes. They have no sewer systems built out. They have no armies built out. They have nothing at all in this world. And wouldn't you imagine that if you are these people right now, you're looking at the to-do list going, okay, look at all we've got to accomplish. We've got to do and do and do and work and work and work. I mean, we've got so much to do that we're going to spend the entirety of our lifetime running after the list to try to complete it, because it's hard to sleep without that list being done. I mean, there's so many things we have to do, and you could imagine they would be ruled by the list. Here's why I say that. Doesn't it feel like that's what's the same thing happening in our life? Do you ever feel like even in the moments you try to rest, the list is streaming in your head? Have you ever noticed, have you ever felt like in our world and our culture and how we live, that we are so busy that the list, and once again, we may not need to build a nation, but we've got to do our kids' homework, get them to soccer practice, we've got to fix the garage, we've got to fix something that broke in the kitchen, we've got to pay the bills, we've got to work out. We've got so many things that we've got to do that taking a day a week to rest and worship and do no work in that rhythm seems so difficult and complicated to live the way that God calls us to live. Why? Because the list is driving us and driving us and driving us and driving us. And see, God understood something. If I don't put this boundary in place, if I don't put this rhythm in place, if I don't put it on their calendars where it's not flexible, here it is, every single week, here it is, then what will happen is, without those boundaries, they'll never be balanced. And they will spend the rest of their life building and doing and doing and doing and never being and never experiencing. And they will miss out on the life that I have called them to live. And so one of the central things that God has given his people is, hey guys, listen, you can live like this. This is the way he designed you. But here's what I want you to challenge you. He knew there'd be struggle with it. He knew there'd be people going, yeah, but God, this has been a really busy week. Yeah, but God, this is like final season. Yeah, but God, this is sports season. And yeah, but God, this is another sports season. And so he understood that there'd be us reasoning against God going, yeah, but God, that's great when I'm 70 or whatever that is, when I'm older and stuff like that works out. But right now, I just can't live like that's impossible. And so this is the promise that God attaches to this command that he's given us. Notice what he says next. We continue to read. God says, for in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth. God's pretty powerful. He accomplished a lot working 6 days. The sea and all that is in them. But he rested on the seventh day, and therefore the Lord, here's what he says. What's that word? He blessed that Sabbath, the rhythm, the routine, and the boundaries, the Sabbath day, and he made it holy. And I love what God's saying. He's not saying to you, hey, it's okay for you to live like this and rest and take naps and enjoy your family and come worship. It's not just okay to do it. I command it, and I'm actually going to bless you if you do it. In other words, I want us to hear this for a moment. The creator of the universe who controls everything, he owns everything, he determines where people live and how they live and what happens. That God looks at his people and us and says, hey guys, just so you know something, it's not just that you have the ability to live like this, which is far more enjoyable. I'm commanding you to, and then if you do it, I'm actually going to bless you. In other words, that your life will actually do more with the favor and blessing of God, working 6 days a week and creating the boundaries, the rhythm, and the routines of a Sabbath than you can if you do not do it. And I love this because you know what? Jesus said the same thing. This isn't just some law that Moses gives the people that isn't relevant to your life, because you can fast forward hundreds and hundreds of years and you get to Jesus. The people were questioning Jesus on this whole idea of the Sabbath and what was going on. And I love what Jesus says, because in one sentence, he reveals the heart of your Father, right, that he wants for you the Sabbath, because it's not designed to be this burden. In fact, listen to what it is that Jesus says. Jesus said to them, the Sabbath was made for man. It was made for you. Not man for the Sabbath. And I want you to understand this. He goes, hey guys, I just want you to understand something. So many people have this idea that when it comes to God, that he has put these religious routines that are a burden for us. So you better go to church. Because if you don't go to church, you got to check that off your list. God's going to get mad at you because God needs us singing songs to him, Hey, you need to make sure you take a day and you're just praying and worshiping and reading the Bible, and God's punishing you because you got to do this because God needs it. And so in essence, there's so many people that looked at the Sabbath as this religious routine or burden that they had to follow to make God happy. And Jesus goes, that's exactly wrong. God did not make the Sabbath for himself. God made the Sabbath for man, for you. In essence, you need this. Jesus is saying something. Listen. That you were designed to thrive, that you were designed to flourish when it came to this life, when you choose to live in this way and live in this realm. And it's so important for us to understand this, that this is not some burden I'm trying to put on you. This is not some burden that I'm trying to give you in this life. What this is Jesus saying to you, the same thing that God's saying is, listen, it's not that you have to live like this. I'm commanding you to do it, so you do. But it's not because you have to do it for me, it's because that you will thrive. You will live your best life. When you live in the rhythm every week, the routine of worship and rest and the boundary of no work, and every 6 days on the seventh day, you put this in your schedule, that God will not only bless you, but this is the best thing for you. And I want us to understand this because we live in a world that doesn't do this anymore. In fact, what I want to do for the next few minutes is kind of look at, so what happens when God's people go, nope, we're not going to do it anymore? What happens when God's people go, you know what, God, we're going to take this more as a suggestion than a sin. We're going to take this more of, it's a suggestion to do it, but if we don't do it, it's not really a sin. And I want you to see what's happened inside of our culture, our families, our relationships, and our bodies, both our relationships, our souls, and our physical bodies, when we decide to live outside of the way that God created us to be. When we remove ourselves from God's blessing because we go, you know what, God, we're not going to live life this way. And what's really great about this is we don't have to theorize. We're going to go, well, I wonder what would happen if we started to do this. The crazy thing is we can actually look at our world because we've done it. See, those of you that are younger, you don't understand something, that in the 1970s, that the Sabbath was actually the law in our land. We live in a Judeo-Christian nation. It kind of was founded. I know we've drifted from those principles. We don't really follow those anymore. But originally, you go to the Supreme Court, the Ten Commandments are there. And much of our Constitution was based upon the laws that God gave the Jewish people to live. We were founded by pilgrims that were, that believed in Jesus and the Scriptures. And so much of the laws of our land come from a Judeo-Christian background. And so built in the laws of our land was it was illegal to be open on Sundays. You took a Sabbath. And the Sabbath was a day for worship and family and rest. And it was built in because we believe that God says, I will bless your society and your land and everything if you do this. But in 1976, in the month of October, a bunch of department stores in New York City got together and said, hey, we don't want to follow God's laws anymore. Like, we're going to kind of do things our way. Imagine that in New York City, right? And we're going to kind of do things our way. And so they said, we're going to break what's called the Blue Law, and we're going to go ahead and open up all of our stores October 1976. And we're going to start getting rid of the Sabbath and opening and getting busier and busier and busier. And it wasn't long after it started there, started to drift all the way across the nation. And pretty much most of the nation would go there, except for Chick-fil-A, by the way, the only place. There you go. And we drift outside of the boundaries. By the way, this wasn't just in America. This was still illegal to open on Sundays in England until 1994. So understand something, that we don't have to go back like to the 1800s or something like that. This was literally in this generation, for those of us that are 40 or older, we kind of grew up in a world, and born into a world that honored a Sabbath. It was part of our culture and part of our life. But in 1976, once again, that began to change. And I want you to begin to see what happened inside of our culture, what happened inside of our life when we begin to drift from what God has called us to do. And here's what I want you to see that happen. The first thing that happened is we added 9 hours a week to our work schedule. Over the last, actually 10 years, by the way. It actually started a little bit more, but over the last 10 years, we added over 9 hours a week. I want you to think about that. That's 9 hours a week less of rest, 9 hours a week less with your children, 9 hours a week doing things. You're behind a computer, at a desk, working for more, over 9 hours a week. We now, as a nation, over this last 30 or 40 years since we've made these decisions, we literally have now worked 2 more months a year, every year, than Germany and France. That workaholism has drifted into our culture more and more. Now, as a result, once again, we took the boundaries off. We're going to do whatever we want to do. We're going to work. We no longer follow God's way of life. We've also seen church attendance decline from almost 80-something%. I think it was 20-something years ago. We were at 70% 20 years ago, and we are now less than half. Less than half our nation will take the time to actually learn from God and worship and raise their children in the faith, because, once again, we work. In our county, by the way, it's less than 10%. You want to talk about a mission that God's given us, this church, to go? Less than 10% of our church, of our entire county, goes to a church. Anyway, this is why we need to continue to go out there and reach people and make a difference to them, right? Because what's happened, we're too busy. Now we've opened up. Now we got sports on Sunday morning. We got travel stuff. We've got work to do. We don't have time to bring God in. And so what's happened is we're working 9 hours extra every single week in the last just 10 to 12 years, by the way, and it's increased more. Less and less vacation time is working more and more and more. We've pushed God out because no longer is that rest and worship. We don't really do it. And so we're raising up a generation of children who don't really know God. Church isn't really a part. It's Christmas, it's Easter, and all of these things like that. Not to mention what happens, we have 1/3 less free time over the last 35 years. 1/3. Let me think about that. That's a lot of time that we used to be able to rest and talk and have conversations, be in relationship, that we no longer have because, once again, we took the boundaries off. We spend, on average, as parents, 10 hours a week less with our kids. I want you to see the brilliance of God and what He did by building these boundaries and these rhythms and these systems. 10 hours a week less. We're with them, right? We're dropping them off at sports. We're running like crazy things. As a result, what they found in this study, by the way, done by Harvard University, where all these facts are coming from, what they found is, as a result, that kids are having poorer performance in school. They're having more mental health problems, higher drug and alcohol use. Teen suicide is going through the roof because our children don't have their parents to really pour into them, and everyone's so busy and on their phone all the time, they're not developing relationally or emotionally enough to handle the stresses of life. As a result of this, they also see, listen to this, the number one prescribed pill in America is anxiety related. We are stressed out to the max. We have more than we've ever had. Our houses are bigger, our cars are nicer, our clothes are nicer, our phones are nicer. Like, we have everything in the world, but we can't enjoy it because we're so stressed out, and we're missing out on our kids, and we're missing out on rest, we're missing out on our spirits, we're dying, and all of these things, and all these things are happening. In fact, listen to this, marriages as a result of this are being robbed of intimacy. Like, how do you have intimacy when you have two people going crazy all the time? Marriages and families are falling apart since this at an alarming rate, higher than any time in our nation's history. The collapse of the family, why? Because we don't have time for it, right? Because haven't you found it's in the margins of your life that these relationships are given strength? It's in the margins of our lives that God begins to move and do these things. And Harvard's like, yeah, here's what's happening. The family unit is collapsing. Children are being raised up. Look at what's happening in these generations. They can't navigate through life because we just work. Parents can give them lots of nice things. Don't get me wrong. We buy them great stuff, but we can't give them ourselves because we're so stressed and we're anxious and we're dealing with this. Not to mention, we're over in the last 30, 40 years, 90 minutes less a day in sleep. And the end of the article, it begins to write some things, and it says Americans are literally working themselves to death, and this extra hours contribute to heart disease, hypertension, gastric problems, depression, exhaustion, and a variety of other ailments. And Jesus said, the Sabbath was made for you. It's not this burden, this rhythm of every week, these boundaries. You can't do any work. Like, you've got to rest and you've got to take a nap, and it's okay. Talk with your kids, be with your wife, go with your friends, work out, go to the beach, do these things. This was my gift. This was God's gift to you. And we, in 1976, for the sake of more in this world, hey, we don't need God. We're not going to follow in our lives. We're going to just take some boundaries out of our life. And yeah, we're going to get rich, but we can't enjoy it. And little by little, we drift from God's way of life. We don't have the rhythm. We don't have the routine of worship and God and rest. And we don't have the boundaries anymore. And so we just do whatever we feel. And I want you to see, look at what's happened. In fact, they did it in the same study. They begin to share what begins to happen inside of human beings when you live in a constant state of stress. So I just looked at some of those things, but let me tell you what begins to happen to your soul. Let me begin to tell you what begins to happen to you, and maybe some of you are going to read this list and go, that's why my husband is, that's why my wife is, or some of you need to look at the mirror and go, that's why I am. And he goes, here's what happened, is that the more stressed you live, in other words, the less you take time to rest, less you take time to have these boundaries, and the more you just drive in this life and live like this, here are the results, that you as a human being are going to become more critical. You're going to see all of their weaknesses and problems. Why? Because you don't have time for their problems and weaknesses. They got to get it right. Your kids, they just got to do their homework. I don't have time to. You just got to get it right. You're going to become more frustrated with people. Like, you're just going to live in a constant state of, man, I've got so much to do. I don't have time for your affairs. I don't have time for your issues. You just got to be there. You got to do what you say you do. I don't have time to deal with this. And I'm just living in a constant state of frustration towards the people we're in a relationship with because we have no capacity to have any error in our lives. We begin to live overwhelmed, and so what happens is we can't enjoy today. Sometimes we have a hard time even starting tasks because we live in this chronic state of exhaustion. We tend to, as a result, we have to over-medicate, whether it's overeat, whether it's, once again, the number one prescribed pill, anxiety medication, whether it's drinking alcohol because we can't calm down, so the only thing that can calm us down is if we take something that will actually begin to do something inside of our body that's not healthy for us. We have a hard time sleeping, so even if we go to bed, we can't turn our mind off because our mind is, we're going, living outside of the boundaries God has called us to live. We have this tendency to feel inadequate because we never feel good enough because we're always letting someone down. Because we're just so used to, you're supposed to just do, and go. And, we put a badge of honor on busyness in our society. We brag about it. How you doing? I'm crazy. How you doing? Oh, I'm so busy. Like, that's awesome. And so we just have created that culture. And so we just feel like we always need to be there for everyone at every time. And so we constantly look in the mirror and go, I'm not good enough. And then we have reduced energy, and we always, once again, feel exhausted. And I want you to see something. None of these were spiritual studies. It's Harvard University. These people are looking at it going, wow, look at what happens to human beings when you take the boundary of Sabbath off. Look at what happens to society. Look at what happens to family. Look what happens to your soul. Look what's happened to your emotional health. Look what happens to your joy. Look at what happens to everything in your life when you stop living the way God has called you to live. Where God says, here's the command I'm going to give you. Every single week, there's going to be a day, and it's devoted to God. You need to fill your spirit. It's going to be devoted to rest. You can do no work. The rhythm, the routine, and the boundaries. And when we took it off, it was catastrophic to our lives and catastrophic to so many people. In fact, let me just tell you something, because I know this is heavy and we're walking through this and this is hard, and some of you are thinking, how do I do this? But here's what I want you to understand is we're going to go through a lot of different stuff we're going to look at mental things and so many things we can do to help live less stress. But here's what I want you to understand when it comes to that's this, that it is impossible. It is impossible not to live in a constant state of stress without a consistent habit of rest. It's impossible. That's not just God saying it, by the way. That's Harvard University saying it. In other words, some of you are going, man, I want less stress. All those toxins, I just read at the beginning, right? All those issues, you're like, man, I don't want to. Some of you are feeling some of these struggles. And here's what I just want to tell you. If you don't want to feel that way, there's only one way, because it is impossible not to live in a constant state of stress without a consistent habit, if you will, of rest. This is why it is so important to go in these rhythms and go in these routines and go in these rhythms and go in these routines. This is why I love about this. Isn't God just such an amazing Father? Like, I want us to understand, like, you understand something. Thousands of years ago when he gave his kid, no one understood it, but God's like, you know what, I built you. Like, I built the idea of a husband and a wife and a family. I built the idea of a soul. I built the body and how your body dynamic works. I built society. I know how it works. And I love the brilliance that Jesus and his Father look to his children and go, yeah, we've got things to accomplish, right? We got to build the kingdom of heaven on earth. We've got jobs. But here's the beauty. You can do it within these boundaries. In fact, I will bless you even more 6 days a week with these boundaries and a healthy soul, body, spirit, family, and marriage than if you try to do this 7 days a week without my blessing and favor. And here's why I say this. Guys, this is hard. When I was in my 20s or when I was just getting married, didn't have children, this was not as hard. But here's what you're going to discover. When you begin to enter into, and I think this is the hardest phase, when you get to enter into that phase of work, career, ministry, and children and family, this is a very, very hard thing to do. And by the way, those of you who don't have those yet, that's great. You still can establish those rhythms and routines, so when you get there, you can have a healthier work, marriage, family like that, right? So even if you're not in that rate, we all need this. And here's what I mean this is hard. See, in the beginning of actually, even from time when I owned my businesses and was working 7 days a week for a season of my life, it was awful on our marriage. It was awful in our lives. It was just a miserable time. And then when I even got into ministry for a season, I didn't know how to say no to people, right? There's all these good things, and everybody wants a piece of your time. And it's all good, right? There's so many things. And so I would just work, and I would go, listen to this, I would go 50, 60 days in a row without a day off. I would work, when we were building our Boynton campus even 6, 7 years ago, it was exhausting, and I'm trying to be a pastor, trying to be a construction guy, trying to do all this stuff. And I remember what happened at the end of it is all those side effects I began to feel. I wasn't sleeping. My marriage wasn't in the best place that it could have been. My soul wasn't in a good place. I didn't have energy. I was exhausted living on caffeine. And it's in those moments I began to realize, God began to put in my heart years ago and said, hey, you don't have to live like this. Not just you don't have to like this, you can actually be more productive, more healthy, accomplish more great things if you don't live like this. And that's when I began to put the boundaries in my life. To go, you know what? I'm going to live with the Sabbath. And let me just tell you why I say this is hard. Let me just give you a glimpse of how this plays out in my life, because for your life, you're going to have to create these boundaries. You have to discover when your Sabbath is and how to do it. See, a couple weeks ago, we had the executive pastor of Church of the Highlands, the second biggest church in the country, come in, and he spent 3 days at my house, stayed with my wife and I and our family, and we just kind of picked his brain. They have over 55,000 people this week in small group, 55,000 people in small groups all over the state of Alabama and in Georgia where these people live. Now, we know from studies that being in a small group is one of the single biggest determining factor of someone's spiritual growth, spiritual health, and the way God designed us to live. And so we're trying to grow. How do we help more of you in our crazy lives make time for this community? So he called me, said, I'll come down and spend some days with you. We did. But it was busy. It was awesome, but it was really, really busy. And then from there, we went ahead and went to a conference that we had to learn more stuff about church, and it was great. And then from there, last weekend, I wasn't here, but my wife and I had the incredible privilege to host some of the key pastors and leaders from our county together at our house up in Orlando. And so what I mean by that is, that meant like Todd and Julie Mullins from Christ Fellowship, which is an amazing couple, love them to death, they're good friends. Jimmy and Kristen Scroggins from all the family churches you see in our, I think they have 8 or 9 different campuses. We're at our house, staying at our house for a couple days. We had Calvary Chapel, the Palm Beaches was up there. Their pastor and his wife are staying with us as well. Bibletown from Boca Raton, Victory from Boca Raton, Generation Church. And so all these churches are gathered together, right? And they're staying in our house for 2 days, which means we have to prepare. My wife wanted me to clean. clean the house, evidently, with all these people staying at our house. So spent all these days getting ready for everything, getting this stuff ready. And then we spent all of these days going through meetings, doing some great stuff. Like, I think we decided to gather together, and hopefully 70 different churches are part of Church United. I'm on the lead team of it. And we're going to help deal with foster care. I don't know if you know this. There was 380 children in our county last year that were taken from their home because of an abuse situation of some type. And there was no homes for them to go to. And that's just not acceptable in our county. Like, our churches are going to band together, and we're going to do something. We're going to have a meeting in May, and we're going to mobilize hopefully 70 different churches together to help solve our foster care problem, right? So I want you to see these are good things, right? And then I get home, I don't feel too well, and I say all this because it was crazy busy. We had planned encounter nights. We're doing on Wednesday nights here for worship and growth and all stuff like that. And some really great stuff. Well, at the end of the day, when I finally got home, I was so exhausted, I had meetings, that my normal days to prep, I was not feeling well. I was sick, so I was kind of in bed. And it came down to, like, this week going, man, I'm not as ready as I'd love to be for today's message. Now, I've studied and thought about it for a long time. Please don't hear that. But it wasn't all together. I hadn't memorized, hadn't put all the stuff together. I'm still working on it. And I remember how hard it was. I woke up super early to try to get everything done, and I didn't get everything done. And there I found myself. So, Lord, what do? Do I take the Sabbath and come as unprepared, as not as prepared as I would love to be, and trust you'll bless? Or do I just make an excuse to work and not take a Sabbath on the day I'm teaching on it? And so I made the decision. I just shut the computer down, shut the Bible down, shut everything down, and I just made the decision. God, I really believe that you'll bless me if I live like this. And I believe that the long pattern of my life, once I start making excuses of why I don't do it, those excuses will then begin to become a habit, and those habits will begin to change my life. So God, here's what I'm going to do. And I woke up on Saturday morning, and I just began to worship God, and I remember just playing some music and praying. My boys and we decided to go wrestling on the trampoline, and they tried to play alligator. They tried to run across the trampoline without me grabbing them, and we're just having so much fun. They put ice down my back, and I'm then grabbed them, and I dumped the whole ice tray on their backs, and they're running around, and they wanted to drive the golf cart over the ice to make snow, and it was just wonderful. And then my wife and all of us decided to get bikes and go to Palm Beach Island, and we rode all the way up and down this beautiful water. We sat down. The kids were playing, looking for like crabs, right by the water. My wife and I were just sitting there enjoying, getting pictures, and just having a great time. Then we took them to ice cream, and I introduced my boys to the magic of orange sherbet and ice cream mixed together. They never had that. It was magic. I even let them eat some of their ice cream. Most of it was mine, but I let them eat some of it because it was so good. And it was just this amazing, incredible time. And then we got home, and we once again, we played a little more, had some more fun around the house. We fed squirrels together in our side yard. And then we decided, hey, wait, there's a boundary. I can't do any work, right? So this is like, what do you want to do? Let's just go on a golf cart ride. And so we got on the golf cart, and my parents live in the neighborhood, and we just stopped by unannounced, and there my mom and dad were. My nephew and niece were over. We didn't even know that. My mom made spaghetti. We just said, well, let's just all eat spaghetti. And so there, my sons are playing with their nephew and their niece, and sitting on grandpa's lap, and we're just, my mom made vanilla or banana pudding, and we're just all sitting around this dinner table with my family. It's just an amazing time. And then we took our dog on a run and came back. We watched a show, and then I was sitting there in bed just going, God, what a gift the Sabbath is. Like what I mean by that is it's in the margins of your life when you have those boundaries, you can't do anything else, that some of the most beautiful times happen, doesn't it? Like, I just look at that and I go, man, imagine if I would have just compromised that and said, no, I just got to work, and last week, and this weekend, and I just don't have time for you. Imagine the memories that I would have enjoyed over a lifetime of not doing that. Because, by the way, I hate to say this, the list is never done. It's never going to be done. It will never, ever, 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 ever be done. And I remembered this moment last night, so enjoyed. I was just sitting there, just cuddling, all of us lined up in the bed, watching the show, and just kind of ending the evening together, and just we're holding hands, and it's like this beautiful moment. And it's like God reminded me, this is the result of enjoying the Sabbath. This is what happens when you commit to this as a dad and a mom and a household and a family, as hard as it gets and as much as there's things you want to do, because it's hard. There were so many things that I went, next week, I have lists like this of important things that I need to do that I just shut them all down and said, I'll get to it next week because I'm never going to get this time back. And my healthy soul is more important than a perfect message. And my healthy children and family is more important than everything being just right. So you know what? That's going to be next week. That's going to be next week. That's going to be next week. But what's not going to be next week is the rhythm and the routine and the habit and the boundaries of no work. And God did this. Here's what I want you to see something. It's in these margins, by the way, God designed your families to flourish, your marriages to thrive, intimacy to take place. If you don't put those boundaries in place, it's going to be so scheduled, you're not going to be able to do it. If you don't put those boundaries in place, you're going to miss out on those things that God has for you in your relationship. Here's what I want you to see something. Your relationship, your marriage, and your family is going to be better because you do this. Not just that, listen to this. I want you to see what happens to your body as well. You know, physically, God actually wired you to do this. So not only do you have a healthy relationship, let me just read you some of the results that the doctors have said. Hey, when you're in a regular rhythm of rest, and you're in that routine of you're just resting, and you're not living in a constant state of go, 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 and do, and do, and do, here's what happens. Your heart becomes more healthy. Your immune system gets better. So when you begin to shut down all of that cortisol, which kind of puts into your body and kind of makes you kind of live on edge, which actually is toxic and breaks down your system, as you begin to just rest and you get this habit of it, this routine of it, it's not just when you're exhausted, when you do it every single week, then your immune system gets stronger and stronger. You get sick less, so you have more energy. You improve your cognition and your memory. You become a better leader, a better mom, a better dad. Once again, working 6 days a week than 7. It prevents onset of depression. You have more joy, more drive to get things done. Help maintains a healthy weight. You lose weight. It lowers your risk of developing cancer. In other words, God says, I want you to see not just relationally, but your physical body begins to get healthier. You can accomplish more with God's blessing on your life in 6 days a week with those hard boundaries than you can work in 7 days without it. Not to mention your spirit. Do you know what? Your spirit and your soul needs this? See, every single day of our lives, we're living a culture that just drags us away from who God designed us to be, creates identity that isn't truth, creates value systems that thinks it's more somehow identify with better. And I love that God says, no, I'm going to build a rhythm in every week of your life where you come together for an hour or so, maybe a couple hours while you serve one and attend one, and you're serving God, and you're like, this is what Jesus is, I'm doing his heart, and you're developing that relationship. You're worshiping God, and we're here singing together, and we're reminding ourselves of who God is and how much he loves, and how powerful he is, and how much he cares for you, and how much you love him, and God's got your future in his hands, and you can and what's happening, literally what's happening, the cortisol is being removed from your body. And you're becoming physically more healthy, but your soul is being filled. God inhabits the presence or the praises of his people. Some of you are here, you made the decision. What'd you do? You created a boundary, and you're here at church. Unfortunately, the average person only goes 1.7 times a month, but you guys are going to beat that. You're going to do better than that, and you're going to be here every week, right? Because that's what God's called us to do. But what's happening right now? Here's what's happening. Well, hopefully what's happening, some of you, God is knocking on your heart, and we're using the scriptures, God's word, and the Holy Spirit, hey, this is how I've called you to live. Like, I'm not just allowing you to live like this. I'm actually calling you, commanding you, and blessing you if you will do it. And so some of you are going to have conversations the way home in your cars, and you're going to go, man, we need to look at what this looks like. We need to create a boundary. We need to do a better job of this. We need to figure out what no work means and define it so we're not mad at each other. We need to put some things in place. Some of you, a few weeks ago, you learned what it's like to focus on not just the battles, but the victories, and to focus more on the victories and the battles to increase your faith. And week after week, what happened is God's filling your spirit. He's bringing life to your soul. So you can be a better father, a better husband. You can be a better boyfriend, a better girlfriend, a better boss, a better employee, a better grandparent. You can thrive in this life. Why? Because God built these seasons and these margins of your life to flourish spiritually, to flourish relationships, to replenish your body. And yet for too long, we've made this idea of a Sabbath as a suggestion instead of not taking one, understanding that's a sin. And the sin of not Sabbathing on a weekly basis has incredible consequences. So here's my challenge to you as we come to close. It's really simple. Take a Sabbath. Like, it's not rocket science, right? It's like I'll help you a little bit around it, right? Some of you go, I can't take a full day. Great. So maybe you need to take 2 half days. Like, I still think full day is the best, but maybe you need to take multiple times. Here's my challenge to you. Would you create a boundary or boundaries in your life where you make the commitment to do 3 things? Where you make the commitment to do no work, number 1. We make the commitment, by the way, to bring God in somehow, some way, whether it's church, prayer, reading the Bible, whatever that is, doing devotions with your kids, and where you rest. That's what it is. In fact, my wife and I, we have our day, but beyond that, my wife and I have been in this conversation going, hey, sometimes 1 day a week's not even enough for us because it gets busy. We'll take that day, but what if we were to look at, for us, Wednesday nights? And we're having conversations when we're not doing First Wednesdays or Encounter Nights that we're going to try to create Wednesday nights. We're going to put the kids to bed like 7:45, a little bit early, and we're just going to just be together. And, sometimes we might be watching a funny movie. Sometimes we might be sitting out by a fireplace. Sometimes we might be playing pickleball or basketball or sports. Like, we can do whatever. We don't even need a babysitter, right? We're going to stay there, but we're going to create the boundary where we're going to take our phones and we're going to put them away. So if there's an emergency, we're not available. Find someone else, because that's a boundary that we're putting in place in our marriage to just enjoy our marriage and our life, to replenish, to plan, to do those things like that. And so we started to work on creating these multiple boundaries in our lives. In fact, we're even talking about taking our phones at 5 o'clock and putting them in a drawer every single night. Because you know what? It can wait till tomorrow. It can wait till tomorrow. And here's why I say this. It's not to brag or make you feel guilty. Here's why I want to say this. It's because this is how God designed you to flourish. And it is impossible, listen, to not live in a constant state of stress without a consistent habit of rest. And if you don't put those boundaries in your life, the list will always govern your life, and you will miss out on so much that God has for you. So here's my challenge. We're gonna go through so many places on this, but here's my just one challenge for you. Single people, you can create your boundaries. It might be more spiritual. It might mean you shut Netflix off one night a week. Maybe it's you're gonna serve at church. I don't know what that is, but here's my just challenge. You just create them. Create the Sabbath, the rhythm every week. The routine, God needs to be brought into it. Rest needs to be a part of it. It's okay to do that. And then last but not least, create the boundary where you do no work. And you begin to implement this, and you watch what will happen. Even your kids can be impacted by this. Generations can be impacted by it. And you watch how your relationships go through the roof better. Your body begins to be so much more full of life. Your spirit and your soul so much more full of life. And you begin to live the way God designed you to live, because Jesus said the Sabbath was made for you. Let me pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for loving us so much that you want this for us. Thank you so much for being so amazing and incredible that you built this, that you promised a blessing if we will do this. So God, may we understand this is not a suggestion. This is a sin if we do not. And may we live our life in obedience, not as a burden, but so that we can experience the life you have for us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Well, Journey, what an amazing challenge and a practical step that we can take, that each one of us just find a Sabbath. And we have a saying that we say a lot at the end of a service about not conforming, but be transformed. And this one action step is such a non-conforming action step, isn't it? That we are going to choose not to conform the way everyone else does. Work, but we're going to choose to receive the blessing of God. And what better way? Maybe you're stressed out. Maybe you've just had a crazy week. What better way to start this challenge than with prayer? At the end of this service, as everyone's dismissing, we're going to have a prayer team up at the front. We'd love to pray with you for any needs, whether it's related to today's message or not. We'd love to pray with you. And as always, Journey, as we close every service, as you go today, do not be conformed, but be transformed. Have a great week.